All right, we are live. Welcome
We are.
back to Decentralized Radio. What's up, man?
Not much, dude. I'm making it work. I'm making it work today.
Yeah, I was just inside, sort of, for like the last 2.5 hours. So it's like I need to get outside, but I had to come on this sunny corner of my deck because of the wind and windy Wyoming here. So
Yeah.
I guess what we want to talk about is what's the title? Bitcoin, Wyoming, and hunting.
Decentralized living. Yep.
Decentralized living. So Ryan came up and visited me. So what did you think of Wyoming, Ryan?
It actually changed my perspective quite a bit because I had been through Wyoming, several times traveling on 80 East to get back to Michigan to visit family or whatnot. But I hadn't really been many places in Wyoming, minus Yellowstone like a couple times. But I never really got to experience, say, the culture or really drive around anywhere else besides Cheyenne. So it was cool to see this sort of maybe lesser known gems of Wyoming. Sort of like your town is a very beautiful place. I won't say it by name to protect your privacy, but it was great. I mean, I loved it. It really made me think about where I want to be. And also, I have to say this. I just got back from camping, but I noticed this in Wyoming too. I slept like the dead at your place. I was like out like a light, and that was great.
Yeah, I think it's such a huge difference from like the city, like being in Salt Lake, which is a pretty decently populated area, and being out here. Oh, being out here, it's like, um, I don't know how many people are in the Salt Lake area. Like a million.
Yeah, something like that. Like a whole third of the population's like in Salt Lake itself. I think there's
The
only like,
greater
yeah, it's pretty
metro
intense.
area. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for people who aren't aware, Wyoming, it's like 550,000 maybe. I think it's the least populated state literally in the entire
Mhm.
United States. And we went down to Cheyenne as well. And for the longest time I thought Cheyenne was like, 100,000 person city, but it's actually not as big as even I thought it was. What it's like 60,000 or something,
60,000.
but
Yeah.
yeah, between I guess Cheyenne, Laramie, and Sheridan on kind of the east side. Well, Cheyenne and Laramie are close by. That's like 100,000. So yeah, it's pretty spread out. I live in central Wyoming, so as Ryan you said, it's not a lot of people come up here. But if you are driving to like Yellowstone, like there's not a ton of towns and there's only a few roads, so you do naturally a lot of times drive through. But yeah, I sleep. Something I noticed, and even when I did track my biometrics via the Oura Ring, like my HRV, my resting heart rate, my sleep scores, whenever I came up here, or I was living up here compared to being in Salt Lake or traveling, so much better, like way better.
Yeah. Well, I was even going to add to that because, like, one of the things I also really liked about, especially where you were living, was access to nature. Like in Salt Lake, you have a pretty good access to nature compared to maybe some other cities that are located near mountains, or like LA has mountains, but it takes hours to get out there. Even in Denver, really, I was shocked going back to Denver this last year how far away from the mountain you actually are when you're in Denver. It takes a hot minute to drive there, and I can get to the mountains here in like maybe 10, 15 minutes. But the difference is you're in nature 5 steps away. We went to a really cool, I think it was a state park right by your house to see some bison and stuff. And it was not only 5 seconds away, but it was like the difference between there and here is that when you go into nature, there's still tons and tons of people here. Like if you try to hike here, it's completely crowded. But there,
Yep.
it seems still pretty calm. So I really liked the lack of people, really, and we kind of mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few like I guess you'd call them hills here.
Mhm.
Like 5 to 700 foot elevation gain. That yeah, I literally drive to and like I trail run them. I just run up them or hike up them, and it's really nice because usually there's no one there or maybe like one or two people at any given point in the day, and yeah, it's really easy and yeah, there's only like 2,000 people in this town, so it's quite nice. But even when I want to do like the bigger hikes, like this weekend, I'm going to go to the Wind Rivers, and
Nice.
I mean, I'll probably see like less than 15 people in like 3 days. I think that's the goal. I hope so. Hopefully, I don't see any grizzly bears, but I don't want to see a ton of people. And that was something I noticed in Utah. I was like, I love I love the mountains, I love the access, I love the skiing, but it's just kept getting more and more crowded, and the high density of city talk more.
Hmm.
Sure, I don't want to people who are fun speakers or doing stuff that's just really annoying. So good decentralized living aspect of Wyoming, because a lot of people are into that,
Hmm.
raising their own food or livestock. They're not telling people like go fishing or hiking or things like that. They're you know the it's pretty strong. I mean, there's some polls. It's something I'm working on, is this thing very integrated into the community, and I think we talked a lot about that on a few podcasts.
Well, yeah, that's actually what I was gonna say. Was just like I really like it. Kind of reminded me of where I grew up. So I grew up in small town Kansas, really tight knit, small, couple thousand people towns. And we drove through like several towns where like maybe 200 people, like on the way to other places. And what I really liked was like everyone we spoke to, everyone we interviewed in person, and even the people that weren't in the interviews but were working associatively with the people we talked to were so nice and so welcoming and so willing to share their knowledge and experiences. And so I was really thankful for that. It reminded me of where I grew up because it was just so tight knit, and I felt like there was a sense of like I really like the sense of like, oh, we are from Wyoming and we're proud of being from Wyoming, sort of thing. I thought that was pretty cool. Did I break up?
Yeah, sorry, just moving here. Wait,
Oh
now
yeah,
I
it does that.
can hear you. It's what I want to talk about too is like from it's like non-native EMF. We
Hmm.
talk a lot of kind of just
You still there? I gotta let him know that he dropped out. Hold on, folks. But I guess one thing that Tristan was saying basically was like the lack of one of the things I noticed was like, of course, non-native EMF, but also lack of light pollution. And I noticed that over the last like weekend camping is that there was no light pollution out there. You could go outside and see the stars, which is something that you just don't get in the city, and you don't get where you live. Where I am in Salt Lake City, there's so much light pollution, even in a quote smaller city like where I am in. So it was a really interesting experience, and like I said, the conversations were so valuable. So I'm really excited to get some of those podcasts out. See if Tristan can hear me again or not. I know he's trying to shifting positions. The one thing about being in Wyoming that was a negative for upload speed was upload speed. So I will note that. But other than that, I think it's a small price to pay. Can you hear me again? You there, my man? Well, until he gets back, I will kind of want to get into some of the hunting stuff. I know he's going to be talking a lot more about that. But Tristan, you hear me all right? We actually did our very first live stream at his place in Wyoming, and it was pretty fun. I learned a lot about audio, especially doing it outside. So that was a pretty interesting experience as well. But yeah, he dropped out, so he'll be back in a moment. But I think one of the biggest takeaways for me about doing in person interviews is that you just get this connectiveness that you don't find when you're doing interviews over Skype. They're still great, and I think the access is still fantastic to talk to people like around the globe that you may not have access to, but there's sort of this intimacy with interviewing people in person that you get that body language, you kind of get that dynamic, you get conversation rolling that you just don't find in other settings, which is totally fine. But I think there's something lost there. And for me, that was like honestly the most opening experience. It's kind of sad that I'm not up in Wyoming to film all these things with Tristan because it would make it much more, I think, much more fluid. So we're gonna try to do a lot more things in person as much as possible so that we can get that connectivity. And then Tristan actually broke off after the trip so that he can interview a couple of people in person to sort of get that dynamic. We have a lot of cool people in Colorado that we talked to. We're talking to Ben Justman, who has a great winery down in Colorado, and then hopefully we can get some other people on in the future, such as Ryan Carter, and talk about regenerative agriculture. But we also spoke to AJ, who's up in Cody, Wyoming, about regenerative ag, and those were some pretty interesting conversations. There's a lot that goes into it that I think people don't understand, and so that's going to be a very pretty interesting episode. So stay tuned for that one. Are you back, my friend? You gonna be
Yeah,
all right?
my computer got too hot in the sun, so
It's okay. I feel like I was
was
holding down the fort. I was holding down the fort for you.
no, good job. Yeah, upload speed, son, not great in Wyoming, but what were we talking about? Yeah,
We were talking
just like
about
that.
EMF.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice. The light pollution, the noise pollution, those
Mm-hmm.
are great points. I think, yeah, I mean, it's just more decentralized living, which is like kind of what we're all about. It's cool to hear that you're thinking, more long-term vision. Definitely my goal out here is to get, some land and get a house built and have, acreage to raise my own food.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a lot of things going on in the health space where it's always like people, I feel like there's a gravitation towards homesteading, and that's why we've had some good homesteading podcasts and or coming out soon with some more.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's this gravitation towards like this need that you have to like move to the tropics or move closer to the equator. And, a place like Wyoming is, there's tons of sun, besides maybe like the dead of winter. But, it's way more sun than we get in like Central Europe. So I think
Mm-hmm.
it's something that people need to think about. And obviously, like, the Jack Cruises of the world are telling everyone to move to El Salvador. But, I highly value like the freedom, liberty of Wyoming, as well as the climate and the nature. So,
Well, and just to add to that too, it's like with the sort of, I mean, we did. I was telling everybody we were doing. We did our first live stream ever there in Wyoming, and it was cool to have that in person dynamic. But we kind of talked about some of that sort of. We talked about seasonal eating, seasonal living, and then also that idea of like you need to move to Costa Rica or like Central America to be optimally healthy. And I think the truth of the matter is that you can get a huge bang for your buck where you are at, and for people of European descent, especially, it makes even more sense to not be in the tropics long term or year round. Um, but it's really, you get out what you put in. If you take advantage of the summer months, get that UV, like you said, it's actually higher than Central Europe. If you get out and get it, then you'll be set for the winter. And that's naturally what would have occurred. But the problem is you have to get into that mindset and get into that new lifestyle, which is the conversations that we had with people there.
you need to be more deliberate. Like, it's easy to go live on a beach somewhere and eat seafood and get
Mm-hmm.
sun all year round. Like, it's actually pretty easy. But then even I would argue that, if you want to talk about like mitochondria, like haplotypes, are we really adapted for that? Like, I know I burn heat, like, and like Doug Wallace talks about this all the time, is like, people who are loosely coupled like produce more heat. People who are more tightly coupled, mitochondria, which are the ones closer to the equator, are much more efficient. They don't have this heat, but that heat is helping me like in the winter. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's cold here, like pretty much like, 9 months of the year. Even right now, like it gets down like below 60 at night. Like it's pretty cool. even though we're having a historically cool kind of start to the summer. But you just have to be really deliberate about where you are eating seasonally and embracing that. In the winter here, like, it makes sense to be low carb because nothing
Mhm.
grows, and you have to get cold adapted, and that'll also improve like your mitochondrial health. So you just it's more challenging, but I think, we're fair skinned people. There's a reason why we are, is because then we can really absorb all that, vitamin D and the benefits of producing melanin quickly, when the sun and the UV is present. But like I said, it's way sunnier here than Central Europe and Northern Europe. Like, it's not even close. And yeah, I think, if you're really sick, maybe you consider moving south. But there's, actually, my area that I live in was known as like a healing place, like with the
Mhm.
hot springs and everything for many, millennia through the native Indians, Native Americans. So that's Wyoming,
That
but
was
don't
my
move
favorite
here.
part. Yeah, don't move
Yeah,
there. Yeah, everybody go to Costa Rica.
it's
Um,
actually full, so
it's actually
I'm
full.
sorry.
The hot
Uh,
springs were great, though. I will say that. I really enjoyed that.
yeah, it's a good source of minerals, natural minerals, that you can absorb quite well. And the one in town that we went to is, they don't. It's not like chlorinated or anything, which is nice. But I kind of want to shift gears
Hmm.
here. So we talked to a lot of Bitcoin folks.
Yeah.
I talked to one more at the end, and we're kind of. I think maybe we'll do like a little Bitcoin series when we release all this. So we talked, about mining, Bitcoin mining, pretty much for like a whole episode, energy consumption, which is cool. Then we talked about like the banking side, with Caitlin Long, which was awesome. And then I went to Denver and talked to Matt Hill about Star9 Labs, which is really awesome. Actually, like decentralized solutions in terms of computing.
That's cool.
But I'm curious, Ryan, what do you now, what were your takeaways? Because we don't want to spill too much of the conversation, of
Hmm.
course, but, you learned a lot. What were your takeaways? What were you most blown away by in terms of what you learned from our brilliant guests talking about Bitcoin and decentralized solutions?
Well, it was really interesting talking to Caitlin Long because I didn't really know. We in that episode, just for a little bit of preface, we kind of talk about the history of the banking system in the U.S. and she does a really good, thorough overview of like the beginning through the FDIC introduction in 1933, to now, and sort of the pitfalls there, and also some of the reasons why Bitcoin is beneficial in sort of like an accompaniment to the current system. And I really like that she wasn't one of those people that was super anti fiat per se. Like it's not like Bitcoin one for all sort of thing. I kind of liked like that point of view. I'm trying to not also say everything that we talked about in the episode. I'm trying to like leave a little bit for mystery. But I think actually some of the most interesting stuff was when we talked to Colin the day before about the practical applications for like the energy that Bitcoin produces when mining, and also just the things that you can do with it. I didn't, because you always hear about Bitcoin using up all this energy, but you don't really talk about the energy that you can, or the energy you can utilize from it and put back into things such as like heating water, or like we've had people on the podcast talking about greenhousing, horticultural stuff, and I think that was the most interesting part to me, is about the what we can use Bitcoin energy for, because I had never known anything about that before.
Yeah, the mining stuff for me is like always the most interesting because, just like from an engineering background, it's so
Mhm.
fascinating. To me, it encapsulates like the lack of knowledge that the average person has about our power grid, and how, it's really a sensitive network, and the Bitcoin miners are actually providing a lot of flexibility in that
Mhm.
regard. And, I wrote a bit about that in my book, and there's been more and more coming out, like a lot of these guys at Riot, down in
Mhm.
Texas, working with ERCOT, Energy Reliability Council of Texas. It's just cool stuff, right? Like, the grid is dynamic. You add more dynamic intermittent loads to it, like renewables. It's going to be a bit chaotic. And, we have just an ever increasing demand for like energy on demand, electricity on demand. Like, you don't realize, like, whenever I talk about this stuff, how grateful you are to you just go switch a light switch in your house, flick a
Oh yeah.
switch, and it's there. Boom, electricity, yay, I have light. Which, It's funny because I actually never turn the lights on here in the summer, really. Circadian hacks. But like, do you know what goes into that like moment and just having that all the time, like on a moment's notice? It's a lot goes into it, and it's a very, sensitive system. And it's cool that Bitcoin miners add kind of some versatility, some dynamic load response to that. And yeah, I think people need to get more educated on that, and hopefully they will, because the likes of, always talk about Elizabeth Warren, but a lot of
Hmm.
politicians just really trash Bitcoin for its energy consumption,
Hmm.
and it's actually providing a solution. It has benefits that can be used in terms of the heat produced, and it's not just like mining for nothing. You're mining for Bitcoin. Soundest form of money ever created, and
Well, yeah,
yeah.
and I'll just add to that, and you can probably correct me if I'm wrong, but in one of those discussions we had, we were talking about the EIA projections for how much energy in the grid will be needed by in 2050 versus say now, and I just googled the number, and it's like 45 trillion kilowatts of energy, which is about 20 trillion more than now in usage. And we discussed sort of how the whole green energy movement in its current form will not get us there effectively because the current backups for all of the green energy, solar, wind, is gasoline. And so, in one of the discussions, we sort of talk about how Bitcoin can be part of a buffer for some of these things in between, which I found like super fascinating. Like, I had no idea that that was even a practical application. But it was also really interesting to hear Colin's story about how he used it for heating. But I'm not going to give it all away because I think that's a really fun discussion that people will take a lot away from.
Yeah, it's like, well, it's just the whole nuance of like renewables, right? And we talked about it too. And it's like renewables to me, it's like they're actually a very good source of energy production from a decentralized standpoint. Like if you are off the grid, like you probably put solar panels on your house, and you're not taking up any area that would otherwise be utilized for things that are not destroying or ruining the environment. So like from a land utilization perspective and a material utilization perspective, like renewables are pretty terrible because their energy and power density are very poor. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like this whole ESG narrative. I think anyone with like a engineering background, like you can just look at these numbers and you realize it's not all it's cracked up to be. There's still a use, of course, but it's always going to be a mix of energy. So anyone who tells you it's like, there's coal maxis, there's oil maxis, there's nuclear maxis, there's
Mm-hmm.
renewable maxis,
Mm-hmm.
like, no, it needs to be a mix, but you have to understand the pros and cons like of each. And yeah, like the problem with, some of the, inherently fossil fuel based energy production is, yeah, there are a lot of byproducts, but a lot of that has been improved over the past like decade. But here in Wyoming, for sure, you hear a lot about like some like, just nasty shit that was done like
Mm-hmm.
10, 30, 40 years ago, because like there's no regulation really on that by for big petrochemical companies. So I'm not I'm trying to stay objective in this, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's always going to be a mix. There is no perfect answer. They're actually building a nuclear power plant in Wyoming, I think, as one of
Oh
like a
wow.
Bill Gates test venture
Oh yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that's something that's really interesting, because I don't know. Maybe that's the only thing I agree on with Bill
That's
Gates.
what I
I
was
don't
gonna
know.
say.
It still
That's
makes
what I
me
was gonna say.
It still makes me skeptical,
Yeah.
but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, that was something that I mean we talked about sort of in the podcast that there's an Oliver Stone documentary out called Nuclear Now that I just started watching, but they talk about a lot of the nuclear power stuff, some of the misconceptions, and how it actually can be like a really good thing when done in a practical way. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But the other thing too on that is you mentioned like solar and things like all these green energy things being good in like small settings. I think one of the biggest problems that kind of traverses all these different discussions around health, like medical system, food system, and we had these discussions in Wyoming, is that on a large scale, it's hard to create something that is truly beneficial all around and doesn't have some huge pitfalls. Like we spoke with AJ up in Cody, Wyoming, a lot about regenerative agriculture and sort of the food system and the big four meat packing facilities in the country, and how because on a mass scale, we have these four companies that control this stuff. We have all these problems subsequently down the chain. Same goes with energy. I think the more that this is really what I took away from our trip on a 30,000 foot view is that the more you think on a hyper localized level, I feel like the better off you will be, because it's hard to create something that sustains the masses in the way that benefits everybody,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And so that's why I think we're going to see these shifts over the next several years, as it seems from our conversations of people sort of like you said, people getting into homesteading or all this other sort of decentralized stuff because I feel like we've propped up our system on stilts that are fragile, and I don't think they'll hold in a lot of ways in the next several years.
Yeah, and with that, talking to AJ, talking about sourcing beef, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so Wyoming has like 2.5 times more cattle than people, right? So it's like there's more than enough, food in terms of meat in Wyoming. So that needs to go to a population center. Utah, Denver, Colorado's probably got enough beef too. So it's like, all right, where's the next one? And AJ was talking about like Phoenix and
Mm-hmm.
Vegas. And yeah, so it's like thinking logistically about that. It's like, okay, well, like if there was a coalition or a partnership between like, the state of Wyoming and the state of Arizona or the state of Nevada to, get Wyoming beef down to these population centers, like that would make sense. But, the USDA is just so complex with all these things. But then you think about it as well, it's like, damn, like Phoenix and Las Vegas, like those cities don't even make sense.
No,
Like, I
I
mean,
think about
from
that all
a
the time.
sustainability perspective, especially
Yeah.
water.
And the fastest growing cities seem to be like those cities. It's like there's like, I mean, there's also like Austin and other cities down in Texas and stuff. But like during COVID times, like Las Vegas is one of the fastest growing cities in the U.S. has been for a while. Phoenix is down there, and they're really in these food deserts, and it's not productive at all. And so I don't know, human ingenuity, yes. We'll see where it goes.
I think it's just like it needs to be thought through like a little bit more. And it's like we have this high quality, food producing system in some areas that
Mhm.
just need to be exploited and, connected with. But it's hard because the people who are running the show are, multi-billion-dollar, food conglomerates. So it's refreshing that, people like AJ are working on solutions for this. But yeah, it is really a hyper local approach. I think that's for sure something you see kind of going on. And but even here in Wyoming, like could be a lot better. Just being at the farmers market, I mean, it's cool selling bison at the farmers market, and people are like really excited about this stuff. And there's a lot of people who are gung ho on local, and they just opened, in the other town like a farmers co-op store kind of. And I got our bison in there, and
Nice.
there is a movement. Like even here, it's not like something that's just like ubiquitous. Like everyone's buying everything local. Like no, I go to this grocery store. I mean, you were there in
Mhm.
my town, and it's like there's literally nothing local there.
Mm.
That's a problem, and that might just be that grocery store specifically. There's other ones that are better, but then if you just go to the farmers market or connect in the community around you, you have access to all these local, food items, which in Wyoming are mostly animal based stuff. Maybe here we're getting some produce
Mhm.
increasingly for the next 3 to 4 months. But yeah,
How was the farmers market? Because you were just there the other day. How were people receptive to your Bitcoin sign?
that's a good question. Yeah, well, if you're not aware, I was selling bison. I work for with a bison ranch in Lander, Wyoming. If you want some bison, check it out. I started selling at the farmers market because I was like, this needs to happen, like in the town that we're in, and it's we had a Bitcoin sign, Bitcoin preferred. I put my books out on the table. My buddy Cody did pay me in Bitcoin, but he also got me the sign. So I don't know if that's an official transaction. It is, but I had some people tweet at me. They're like, I might just drive up to Wyoming just to pay you in Bitcoin. I was like, please do. But overall, it's getting the word out there. And I think we talked about this before. It's like if you just start asking people or showing people, oh,
Yeah.
Bitcoin thing, that's going on. What's that? So a lot of people just like, oh, Bitcoin preferred. That's that's interesting. You know, a couple guys, they're like, yeah, I got some Bitcoin. I got a Bitcoin, like singular, like not like it's divisible in any ways. But, and then they stand there and talk to me about like, you know, the very decentralized individuals. And I'm like,
Mhm.
how can I like, you know, how can we connect and get you more involved? We have Bitcoin meetups and stuff. They're not on social media. They're not, you
Yeah,
know, in anything. They're like, yeah, you know, I'm just living the life, but power to you. So I think it was good. You know, again, it's just spreading that message in any way, any form possible. The more people that see and are like, oh, Bitcoin, and I gave my book to a couple other
that's
producers as
awesome.
well, and yeah,
Yeah, I mean, when we were at the farmers market in Lander, we went to, I think it was at the same farmers market as the one you sold at.
yeah,
Yeah, so it was really cool. It was just like a street, had a bunch of like people's tents, and I there was a goat milk sale. He was selling goat milk. This farmer guy, and I was talking to him about. I think I was telling him what we were doing, like why we were in town, because I was telling him we were out of state, because you can refill your jugs he gives you if you're there the next week. And I was like, oh man, I can't, but I'll keep this for broth. But we were talking about how we're doing social media stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, don't even get me started on that. Like I don't know how to use my phone. I mean, I'll break yours if I touch it. And I was like, I think most of these farmers just don't. It's just not part of their lives. I mean, they're so ingrained in like what they do, and that's sort of it. You know, I mean, they show up locally, they sell their stuff, and maybe they have like a processing facility they send their other stuff to. And this was a conversation that we had with Cody about, or not, no, in Cody with AJ about farmers sort of not knowing how to get into this regenerative stuff that he's trying to do, because they're so focused on just their job of raising the cattle, getting it off to the processor, and then that's it. And
yeah.
so it was a pretty interesting conversation.
These people are just trying to make a living, right?
Yeah.
So you have to respect that. First off, you have to respect that they're food producers because they're
Mm-hmm.
the reason why, you know, a lot of you like have food to eat, but then you have to respect how hard they work. Yeah, they don't have
Oh yeah.
time to really even get up to speed with a lot of technology. And obviously some are better than others, but that's a big hurdle, you know, of course, with Bitcoin adoption. But at the end of the day, you know, they're just trying to do what they think's best. So like the worst thing you can do is be arrogant and, you know, act like you know everything. Oh, you need to do like rotational grazing and do this and get the soil balance right. It's like, and they look at you and like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, you know, have you
Yep.
ranched a day in your life? They're like, no, but I read like 5 books on it. It's like, okay, do you know how hard it is? Do you know, I mean, even you want to do rotational grazing, all right, you need to move your animals more. You need the infrastructure, you need the fencing to do that. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
more effort, it's more involved. And, you know, it's a delicate balance of emulating nature. So yeah, being respectful and grateful of local food producers is extremely important. But you do want to, of course, you know, ask them questions and ask them if they thought about things like that, or you know how they raise their animals, and you know show interest, and then they'll respect you. So I would say that's probably a recommendation if you're going to a farmer's market. The worst thing you can do is act like you should give them recommendations on how they raise their food or their
Oh no,
animals.
if anything, you should be asking them questions. I mean, that was
Yeah,
like my
yeah,
whole thing. This trip was like just asking questions about things I don't know. I mean, that was like part of the discussion we had with pretty much everybody on the roster that we talked to, was like just the having more knowledge in general helps you make better decisions. And I think that was like a huge overview takeaway. So just the more you know,
y-
the better you do.
yeah. And I think for going back to Bitcoin, like talking about the mining side of things, talking
Mhm.
about the banking, you know, system, the issues with that, like it gives you a clearer picture of like the whole view of Bitcoin. And that's why I'm excited to release these podcasts, because then you can learn about the whole thing. Like not just, oh, it's going to make me rich, or, oh, it's like a great store value. Like it's so much more than that. And
Mhm.
these are the people that have boots on the ground that are propelling this adoption and this, you know, technology forward. And without them, it wouldn't happen. So you really have to respect that hustle, because it is, you know, technically a very high risk decision to
Mhm.
do these things. But yeah, it gives you an appreciation of, you know, the things that it takes and how long it takes for these things to play out. And that's why, you know, especially talking to Matt Hill, I talk about like Bitcoin adoption and all that. And it's going to take time. Like it's
Mhm.
not going to go to, and it shouldn't go to a million like by the end of the year. We don't want that. The chaos that would ensue if that's the case would not be something you would want to experience. I know personally, I would rather it stay lower at
Mhm.
prices, so I can accumulate more. I understand the value, but when you see like the legislation, the shackling that Caitlin Long's bank
Yeah,
has
yeah.
gotten from the feds, and just like the reputation and things that people say about like the mining industry, when in
Mhm.
reality it's a lot less gray and cloudy and than people think. And New York Times is writing smear articles,
Mhm.
editing pictures. So it's crazy, but it's cool to be in this like disruptive world where it's like, wow, we act like, if you just go and talk to the people who are actually running these companies,
Mhm.
you get it straight from the source. Like, don't trust, verify, and
Yep.
you learn a lot.
Yeah, and actually, I was just going to say, for anybody that has any, like, I mean, I know I had a lot of questions and confusion around Bitcoin, and especially mining and sort of like some of those applications. Like, I think these 2 episodes or 3 episodes that we've done, like with Colin, Caitlin, and you talking to Matt, are going to be really good to sort of dispel some of like the common myths out there, common criticisms. We cover all those things, and I think they're really good. But we also had a really interesting conversation we didn't expect to have with Caitlin about hunting. And I know when I was there with you, you were super stoked about, I think it was like the second day in, because you got your elk tag. So maybe we could kind of jump into some of that. I know I feel like the testosterone is rising in the room the minute you got the tag confirmation.
Yeah, so that was great. And I mean, I don't know how much it talked about hunting on the episode that I did, like, for this show, kind of starting out. But man, last year was what an experience, like getting into hunting. Very intimidating if you've never done it before, especially big game hunting in the Rocky Mountains, because it's totally different than like East Coast, Midwest, like stand hunting. And yeah, on the first ever hunting trip last year of my entire life, I got a bull elk, and it was incredible. It was the most strenuous, like challenging thing I've probably ever done. Hiking, 40 plus miles at above 8,000 feet, and
Wow.
in the wilderness of Wyoming with only my one buddy who, is from the East Coast and had stand hunted, whitetails. So he was helpful for a lot of reasons. But at the end of the day, we had no idea what we were doing, quote unquote, and intuitively figured it out, and we're successful. But the connectiveness, the gratefulness of harvesting an animal and then having that fuel your life for the next year is, wow. Like, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world, and that's all I want to do now. So I still have a good amount of this elk left. It is the purest protein you can get, and we had Stefan van Fleet on
Mhm.
talking about this. We posted that reel today. The nutrient density of wild game is higher if they are eating like diverse, native grasses and things like that. And undebatable. I mean, you can feel it, you can
Mhm.
taste it, you can
I'll
see it.
I'll say this because you let me try some of your elk when we were in Cheyenne because you brought some with you. That thing was dense. Like,
Yeah.
and I always talk about this with people when I say when I eat liver, because I'll cook like a couple, and I don't eat liver every day, but I'll cook like a couple like maybe 3 or 4 ounces of liver, and I'll be full. Like, that will fill you up. And it was really interesting because that's the exact same way I felt eating that elk. Was like, I could just feel the nutrient density in that thing. I was like full after eating just a little bit of it that you gave me, maybe four or
It's
five
it's
ounces.
definitely way higher in protein
Hmm.
because there's like no fat. I mean, these things are just like
Super lean.
lean, mean. They're not that, I don't know. They can be mean, but they're just lean units. Like, they're athletes, right? What was the other thing that, Stefan talked about? He's like, the phenotypes
Oh
of
yeah.
cattle that were like pasture raised are like athletes. And
Yep.
then you
Yep.
want to think about like deer, antelope, and elk. That's LeBron
Well,
James of the meat world.
yeah, and actually, we had a part of the interesting conversation that we had with Kaylin about it was the taste difference depending on the animals, and we talked about this with Stefan too, about basically the
What they
pasture
eat.
the animal ate can change not only the phytochemical and the nutrients that are within the meat, but also like the taste. So she was talking about antelope and how they could taste the difference between sagebrush predominantly feeding antelope versus like grass or alfalfa. and there's like a gaminess difference. And so I find that fascinating. They're just these nuances that I don't think people think about at all. And I remember I told this story on the podcast about how I brought grass fed ground beef just from the store. So like this is just probably from some farm, maybe not even local, but grass fed ground beef home. And I gave it to my girlfriend's mom to cook for dinner, and she tasted it like while cooking it to just check on it, and she thought it was like rotten because it tasted completely different than grain fed beef. And I was like, no, that's just what grass fed tastes like. It has a different taste. So
Yeah,
it's
I think
fascinating.
I think that's a common criticism. I've had people tweet at me like 100% grass-fed beef tastes like shit, like you're
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And it's like we're so indoctrinated with the flavors of food, and we love bland chicken, grain-fed beef, flavorless pork,
It's
and
crazy.
that's what people are used to. And that's why you have to season the shit out of like chicken if you're like a bodybuilder, bro. But
Oh
if
yeah.
you had like a real pasture-raised chicken, it would be a lot more flavorful. And yeah, inherently like grass-fed beef is quote unquote like more gamey, and a lot of people at the farmers market are like, how gamey is your bison? I'm like,
Yeah.
what's what's your background? Are you eating it's not like an antelope, like they're not
No.
eating sage, but it has flavor from the grasses and pasture that it's eating on.
I still think wild boar is probably the gamiest thing I've ever eaten. Um,
Yeah.
and I liked it, but I like kind of that gamey. And goat can be kind of gamey depending on, I guess, where it was raised. But but I love it. I
Yeah,
think it's
goat.
great.
Yeah, goat can be gamey, but the way I see it, I love this cool concept that it's like you can get phytochemicals from meat, and the
Hmm.
higher quality meat that you have, the more phytochemicals. So it's like, you know, you don't need to eat as many vegetables per se as you think, especially if they don't grow locally, and you can get some of that from your meat, which is, I mean,
Well,
that's
and actually,
badass.
there was an interesting study I read recently, and don't quote me on it 100% because I'm kind of paraphrasing from memory, but they were saying like the antioxidants you get from fruits, vegetables, don't do as much as the things you make in like endogenously, like inside your body.
Oh, for sure. And I actually just talked about this at length right before this. Is like, yeah, and for antioxidant wise, like it's great to get these things, these polyphenols, these terpenoid compounds from food.
Mhm.
But like when you start supplementing with like really high doses of these compounds, like it's unnatural, and it's like we have natural antioxidants like in our body. Like
Mhm.
melatonin is one of them. I mean, you can get, antioxidants is just combating oxidative stress, which
Yep.
is, the process, losing redox homeostasis. You can get, free electron donors from grounding, like,
Mhm.
and things like that. And we have, ways to combat these things. It's just like a homeostatic thing that we want to have. Um, so if you have too much, too many free radicals being produced from whatever external stressor, that's bad. But like it doesn't always work, and they've found, there are studies as well that show that, taking these like exogenous
Mhm.
plant antioxidants in extremely high doses can actually sometimes make things worse. So
Well, and we talked about too, like in the last live, I just did a clip from it today, just because I thought it was interesting. Was the how profoundly if like strong melatonin is, like natural
yeah,
melatonin that you make inside your mitochondria, is like the most powerful antioxidant in your body. It's incredible, and you make that, like you make it. So
yeah,
so what I've learned over the last like year or so, and it's just been really banged into my head with the discussions we've had with like Stefan and some other people, is that how can you prep your body to make the best material, whether that's collagen or antioxidants or things that fight oxidative stress. It's really like how can you put your body in the best position to do what it's supposed to do. And I think there's so much emphasis in the health community. It's sort of a tangent on taking things exogenously because it sells and makes money and it sounds sexy, that doesn't, I don't think it really moves the needle like the simple things like getting sunlight or eating well raised meat and all these things. It's very basic.
100%. I mean, just live a more ancestrally consistent life. And then, yeah, you might need to supplement for things like
Hmm.
traveling or, high, EMF exposure areas, or just, stressors that we wouldn't have been exposed to ancestrally, or if you're sick.
Yeah.
But foundationally, the lifestyle habits you go through on a daily basis, sleep, food quality, light exposure, time spent in nature, grounding, like those, yeah, move the
Yep.
needle
And
so much more.
what I learned being out there in Wyoming and over my last couple days, just out in the desert, just sleeping on dirt, basically, was that if you live in a city, you're kind of screwed on a lot of angles. So either you move, not to Wyoming because it's full, maybe Montana, uh,
That's right.
but you either do that, or the second best thing you'd probably do is one, mitigation where you live, all this stuff, and we'll probably do podcasts on that. We have, but it's like take advantage of your weekends. Like I'm going fishing this weekend in the middle of nowhere to like get away. So it's like get outside as much as you can away from everything that causes all these things to occur. And because I just truly don't believe that you can out supplement your way. Like I can't outwear lamb's clothing to the EMF in the city. Like it's so much. You can only buffer so much. So it's really about all this other stuff, and that's why decentralization is super important. I think now more than ever for people's health and well being, is to like think about these ideas that we're talking about in the podcast and implement
Yeah, I mean, it's like a battle every
them.
day going on for like cellular damage, like, and oxidative stress. And, you want to equip your body to be able to fight that better. So, like, really what you're doing when you're getting outside, you're getting the proper lifestyle habits, like you're training your soldiers, your defense systems, you're
Yep.
training them. They're becoming like elite defense combat warriors. Whereas if you just supplement whatever, you might just be giving them like, an RPG, like that's the tool. Here you go. And then what happens when that RPG is gone? They're not strong fighters. So they're
Hmm.
going to lose more often than they're going to win,
Yep.
and that causes aging and cellular damage and chronic disease down the road. So it's, and if you're in this perpetual like losing battle, that's when you get in the negative feedback loops of like cell danger response, and that switch of just sympathetic response of fight or flight is always on, and you're
Hmm.
never actually going to heal. So
Yeah.
that's how I think
Yep.
about it, like.
Yeah. I mean, you also spoke to Michael Amons, I believe, in Colorado, and I actually talked to
Yeah,
him. I
yeah.
talked to him on the phone today, just because I wanted to get connected, and we talked a lot about parasympathetic state, sympathetic state, and how like so many people who are in pain are just not only like they may have a physical issue, but like there are people that don't have physical issues that are in pain, and it's from being in a sympathetic state, whether that's from traumas or all this crazy EMF, or it's like multiple things. It's never just one thing. So I actually wanted to ask you, what were some unexpected takeaways you had on this trip? Because we were sort of in your neighborhood, but I bet I'm sure you had some unexpected things. We did go. Well, one of us went climbing, and that was pretty cool to be out in the hills. But
No, yeah, with Micah, it was exactly that. It was like chronic pain can stem from just being in this negative feedback loop. Like it's a cell signaling
yep.
issue. It's all like a signaling issue. And when I was concussed, I had that issue completely, and I had to figure out how to get out of that, from there are biochemical changes, and maybe you had cell damage, but eventually it's this negative feedback loop. You're stuck in it, and you have to get
Yep.
out of that, or you're never going to like fully heal. And his story was powerful. It's like 10 years this same issue, and you're thinking it's better, and it's actually related to some like past trauma,
Hmm.
accepting that, working on that, and then it's like now you can actually heal from a physical standpoint. Because yeah, at the end of the day, it is all in your head, but like how you treat that, how you attack that, you need to think about it. And if you're just stuck in this hyper sympathetic response of fight or flight, like you're just gonna be, there forever if you don't do something about it. But that's probably the hardest part for people to conceptualize. And yeah, I think
So.
talking about like with Erwin Lacour as well before,
Hmm.
or we did a podcast with him, and
Yep.
is all about that. And that's why like we need to be very cognizant of the states we're in, what sets off these triggers,
Mhm.
and how you can kind of reel back in that body's sympathetic state to being more parasympathetic. and getting back into a healing state.
Yep. Yep. That and just take methylene blue. It's freaking crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are some things that maybe could help you like ease back into it, but it's gonna take a lot more than just that. But yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, the whole like pain connection to you just
Well, think about it. Think about it this way.
neurology.
If you talk, and this has been my experience in the quote chronic illness community or whatever you want to call it, talking to anybody that seems to have like some really gnarly, like tons of autoimmune issues or really bad mental health issues, like we have the mental health crisis, like worse than ever. My mom's a school teacher. She always tells me about how she's never taught so many kids with crippling anxiety before in her entire life. 6-year-olds with just crippling anxiety in class. It's just like it wasn't a thing really. Even when I was going to school, it wasn't like that insane. I didn't
No,
really diagnose anxiety and stuff like that. But it's just like talk about all these things in our lifestyles now. They're completely different than even 15, 20 years ago. But it's this negative feedback loop that you get stuck in and you can't get out. And that's why I'm a huge believer in you can't heal in the same environment you got sick. Even if you're in the same like
but
physical
that
place.
applies to your mental state as
No,
well, like
no,
your
exactly. That's
mind
what
state, right? Your
Yeah,
mindset. Yep.
that's what I was getting to, and I think it actually starts. And I was having a conversation with my physical therapist about this today, about about my anorexia recovery, and it was basically like, listen, you can be told all the every. I mean, this is the problem with any community you're in is like people want answers to a problem they have, but most people aren't even in the right mindset yet to take action
Hmm.
on those tips or tricks or any of that stuff. And until you have that mindset to be consistent or implement change, it really doesn't matter what somebody tells you. And I'm guilty of that, next to anybody. But it's a dramatic mind shift that needs to take place first before anything else, in my opinion.
And that's the hardest. It's the hardest thing to do
Yep.
in life, right? Like take a good long look in the mirror. Who are you right now, and who do you want to be? Where
Hmm.
do you want to get to? What are the things you need to work on, and then reinforcing that, like really, really reinforcing it. It might be fucking insane for you to think that like you need to just like whisper words to yourself while
Yeah.
you're doing something,
Yep.
but that it actually works. Like you need to train your subconscious that you are powerful, you are capable of healing, you can overcome anything. And whatever that way is, like it might be through meditation, it might be just through progressively doing hard things, it might be literally just telling yourself that 1,000 times a day
Hmm.
until you actually believe it. And guess
Yep.
what? Your brain, you can't trick your brain. Like you have to actually believe it, or you're never going to get out of this negative rabbit hole that you're in.
So true. I was talking, I mean, like I said, I talked to Michael today for just a little bit, just kind of shooting the shit. And I was telling him, like, man, it's like even on bad days where I have some sort of flare up or something, like I've never been more positive about like getting back on track. Like this is the like, and that's what you gotta keep in your mind is just like is that mindset part. It's just like it's the
Well,
hardest thing to do, but
the momentum works in both directions, right?
mhm,
Like once you make some progress, like for me when I was concussed, I was like, if I could just get 20% better, like I'm gonna feel great compared to
mhm,
what I do now. And then you get there and you're like, whoa, whoa. I
yeah,
can do anything. I'm going to be like doing X, Y, and Z in 3 months. Like, you can't stop. Try and stop me. That's
mhm,
why I live the way I do because I was there. I was in a dark place. So were you. That's
mhm,
why we have non negotiables, right? Like,
yeah,
we're not crazy. We're not weird. Like, I mean, we are, but it's like for good reason. And I don't care what you do with your life. This is
yeah,
my life. This is how I feel fantastic every day.
yeah.
I wouldn't trade this for anything. And that's why like I'm very regimented in terms of like things that are non-negotiable.
What was your what were some of your takeaways from our trip?
Yeah,
How
I
was
mean,
I on the road? How was I on the road? How was I as a traveling companion?
no, it was good. I think it was great to get this experience. I mean, talking to AJ and Cody, that was like amazing. Like I just love meeting people in Wyoming that are
Hmm.
actually like impacting change because a lot of people are like, Wyoming's like 20 years behind every other state. Someone said that to
Yeah,
me in the hot springs yesterday,
that's
which
hilarious.
it's true in some regards, but it's like you can't get some of the benefits of like freedom and like
Yeah.
decentralization without some of that. It's like, okay, might be okay to be 20 years behind in tech. Like, don't build 5G towers everywhere. Like, I'll be okay with some shitty service. Like, I was on the phone with a processor the other day, and we were playing phone tag. We couldn't contact each other. And it was like, he's like, Tristan, I like that we don't have service because that's the only time I can actually take a break for a second. I'm like, damn straight,
So
brother.
true.
And yeah, so meeting people, like, again, building that network locally for me is like very powerful, very impactful. And yeah, I was blown away by what they're actually accomplishing. And yeah, I think they were just great conversation. I think the in person for sure is huge. Like, all the conversations we had, because they're in person, better dynamic. You actually get to meet and talk to the people, in person before you do a podcast. So you just have that connection already. Like, it's powerful. Like, I really believe that that's the way to do it. And I'm very bullish on in-person podcasts as much as we can. So obviously it'll be like a regional focus here, but yeah, I think, and it was awesome to see that you kind of uh, valued a lot of the stuff we did and appreciated it. And um, yeah, maybe you'll want to leave the city soon. Who knows?
I'm telling you, man, it's getting closer the day that it comes is getting closer every day. Like I can feel it. And I felt it even more over the last couple of days where I literally was we were at Starvation Reservoir, and there where we were camping, at least there was like no service. It was so I basically
Hmm.
turned off my phone for like 3 days, except for when I had to go in town one time to get gas. And that was like the one time I sent messages out basically. So it was like it was super nice. I don't think I've ever not had to charge my phone for multiple days because it was just off the whole time. And what was really cool, and I mentioned the light pollution aspect earlier while you were having some tech issues, but being able to see the stars was insane. Like, and I noticed that in Wyoming too. But like you could like find the constellations, and you could even see like some of the Milky Way, like some of the haze, and it was like it's crazy. You don't get that in any city. Um, so it's just
I
a
mean,
reminder that if you can't leave the city, like at least visit places that are not in the city as frequently as possible.
like, this is just like the real world. Like,
Yep.
nature is the real world. Like, we just have built all over it. And it's progressed society, and it is what it is. Obviously, like, we wouldn't be here. But like, when you get in contact and connect with the real world, it's just like a whole another experience. And then all you want to do is be in nature and be outside.
True.
Like, the night sky hunting, because obviously, I go to bed when like the sun sets here at
Hmm.
like nine
Hmm.
30. It's I'm not watching any. I'm not stargazing in Wyoming in the summer really, but like come October, late September when I'm hunting again, man, you wake up like 4:30, 5 a.m. Or even earlier, and th- that night sky it's next level, and you just want to stand out there
Oh
and
yeah.
just take it all in. But yeah, I think hunting, that's something I want to get more folks on the podcast on
Hmm.
talking about. I think that's really empowering. Again, that connection, it can be very intimidating. So I would love to talk more about that. I have a few guests in mind that I'm
Yeah.
trying to set up, so stay tuned for that, folks. And yeah, I can't wait to not be online for like 3 days this long weekend. There's a long weekend coming up. You don't like take off Monday. You got a 4-day weekend, July
Yep.
4th. Instead of just getting shit faced at the bar, wherever the hell you are, like at least if you're gonna do that, go outside.
Yeah.
Like, which a lot of people do, but just value that time. Like, it really is special. And there's only so many moments like that you'll have left if you don't prioritize it. But that for me slows down time like no other. Like, when you're not on your phone, when you're just kind of like out there, time just goes by so slow, and you can't get back time. That's the only
No.
thing. That doesn't matter how much money you have.
And time will be at one point or another in your life for everybody. I think it's universal. I think time will be at some point in your life the most important factor. And so I think the sooner you realize that, the better. So I am fortunate of that.
and that comes back to decentralized living. Like inherently, like you like live a slower kind of life, like in the
Hmm.
moment, and time will go by slower. Like you'll value these little connections you have more. You'll cook things slower. Like it doesn't all have to be this hyper productive like hustle culture. Like you can be productive. Like but that's the benefit of being healthy too, is like
Yeah.
you have this energy to be productive, but like, take time to appreciate things as well. And
Hmm.
that's what I think decentralization encompasses, the fact that you're not just like you're there in the moment because it's you. It's all you. Like you're accountable, you're responsible for a lot of everything in your life. So you can't just outsource that and
No.
get back, this time and then try and start 5 businesses or something. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree.
But sweet. I think I'm really excited to launch those podcasts. They'll be out in a few weeks. I think we'll have a little Bitcoin themed,
Hmm.
maybe like week and a half, 2 weeks, where we get, a few of these Bitcoin centric podcasts out there. I'm excited for that. We'll try and line up some more hunting podcasts
I'm excited.
with some friends in Wyoming here, as well as maybe Idaho. I've been chatting to some elk hunters in Idaho. And
Nice.
Ryan, are you going to start hunting or what? Like, what's going on there?
Dude, I want to. I actually want to. I should take. I don't know if I'll
Last
be able to
question.
make it this season or not because it's probably too
No.
late. But I can definitely get hunter safety done this year,
So
which I
if
think will be
anyone
cool.
has never hunted before, it's different in every state. First thing you need to do, Ryan just said it, hunter safety. Sometimes it's only online. Sometimes it's online and in person. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
all in person. Um, you need to do it. Just do it, because there's no, you have that. It's good for your life.
Yep.
And then you just need to research. Every state has like a fish and game website. Like go
Hmm.
on there and see what the process is. And usually you have to put in for tags like,
Yep.
spring, early summer, and then you find out right about now. But if you're a resident, here's the thing with hunting. If you're a resident in the state, like you can get over the counter tags as well, which, you don't have to put in
That's
for
awesome. That's
early.
so nice.
And you obviously it costs a lot less. Like Ryan, you're in Utah. Utah's, elk, deer,
Hmm.
I think some antelope maybe, but like,
A little bit.
people out east don't have access to like elk or things like that. So
No,
it's
it's
a
all
pretty
whitetail.
great state to hunt in. And guess what? Just find someone maybe who hunts and just be like, hey, can I come with you? Guess what? They'll say yes, because when they do get an animal, they'll want as many people there to help carry it out. And
Yeah.
you'll get firsthand experience. You'll understand exactly what it all
Well,
takes, and
that's
then you probably get some meat as a reward.
yeah. That's I mean that's the plan. I have a friend that my one of my I guess sort of childhood friends I guess from here anyways. Him and his dad go elk hunting every year, and they got tags for this next year. And so I'm just gonna tag along with them, just for the
No pun
experience of
intended.
going. Yeah, but uh, I'm excited for that. I think that'll be fun. Um, I don't know. I don't know if I want it to be as gnarly an experience as you had. It sounded kind of
I doubt
crazy
it will be.
pulling out this huge elk in the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere. But it'll be fun. I look forward to it. But I definitely want to do it. I talk about it with my girlfriend's dad like all the time. Like, oh yeah, we need to go like next year because
I
he's big
will warn you though,
hunting.
it will, if you get hooked, which is a high chance, if you
Hmm.
appreciate, high quality food, hiking, the outdoors, things like that, you will get hooked, and it will definitely be a big part of your life. But I mean, that's a hobby. For me, it's like the highest reward, because you
Hmm.
get out in nature. Plus, you high chance, or if you're successful, obviously you get rewarded with
Hmm.
high quality, the highest quality protein for a long time. So give it a
Heck yeah.
shot, people. Like if you're into it, like test it out. But just know that there's no, like, once you buy a rifle or like a bow or something, like you're committing hard. Like you don't have to do that. Like you can go with a friend first, like Ryan's saying, to kind of
Mhm.
get a little taste. But it is, there's an expense, of course, to getting
How's
involved in these
how's your
things.
bow experience been going? Because I've seen you shooting out there.
Good. Yeah. So now that I'm back in my house here, I have like actually yardage to play with. And yeah, past week actually I've shot my bow a lot. It's been going well. Trying to work up in yardage, and yeah, it's a cool new
That's a
thing.
whole
And
nother animal.
Yeah, so for me, I have no expectations to get an elk with my bow this year, but even if I just go out there and I'm in it when they're bugling, that's all
Hmm.
I want to experience. And who knows, maybe I will get lucky.
You might. You
Um,
did last year.
so yeah, you never know what can happen out there, but just being in that environment, I'm so stoked. And it's cool to learn new things, right? Like we're
Oh yeah.
adults. You want to talk about like, brain health, mental health, neuroplasticity is like some of the best, you know,
Yep.
things you can do is learn new things, try new things. You're an adult. Like, are you actually learning new things? Physically too? Like, how
Yep.
often are you like physically learning something new, like how to shoot a bow, how to shoot a rifle, thinking
Yep.
about that,
Yep.
playing and learning a new instrument, like learning a new language. Like, people don't really do these things anymore. Trying a new sport, like people are like, oh, it's easier when you're younger. Yeah, yeah, and your brain's sharper when you're younger too. And if you don't sharpen that blade, it's gonna go dull
Hmm.
fast. So
Hmm.
be a kid, be a child, try and learn a bunch of new things. If
You
it's
got to
not
be
for
your own
you,
Picasso.
yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna suck. For me, it's like I hate doing things that I'm like bad at, but then I've overcome this fear where it's like, what if I got to lose? Like, yeah, I don't know. I'd tell you right now, I'm not a good shot. I got pretty lucky shooting that elk last year, but guess
Yeah.
what? I'm gonna practice more and more, and I'm only gonna get better,
True
and it
that.
doesn't matter.
True that.
Alrighty, folks. Anything else, Ryan? Is
I
there
think
any
that's it,
comments?
man. Just stay tuned for future podcasts. We got some exciting ones. I'm stoked to get the ones we just did out because, like I said, the in person conversations are not that I don't want to say they're more valuable, but like you get so much more out of it from that experience. And I think the audience feels that too. There's a reason why people watch Joe Rogan and he just sits down and has conversations, but he's in person with them. There's that dynamic, there's the body language. And so I think these ones are going to be very exciting.
Couldn't agree more. So stay tuned for that, folks. Check us out YouTube, subscribe, Spotify, leave us a review, and I think you can follow so you get
Yep.
updated from the latest releases. We tweet them out. We're on Instagram posting clips, and yeah, check out our affiliates that we have in there. What I mentioned, the Bison Ranch. You can
Yep.
follow us, Family Ranches. Check that out.
We also got EMR Tech from Red Light Therapy. That'll be up soon. I'll get that done.
So we're working. We're going to keep going here. Tuesdays and Fridays is
Yep.
going to be our consistent schedule for podcasts. And then we're going to try and do these lives every 2 weeks on
Yep.
Wednesdays at 4 Mountain Time. So let us know in the comments. Shoot us a message on Instagram for anything you want to hear us talk about in these lives because it's kind of free form.
Mm.
And yeah, we're happy to entertain questions. We can do a Q&A if you got questions. We'd be happy to answer them or try our best.